Stop being so fucking nice and show them how crazy you are. I don't want to act like that. That's the thing. I don't want to be that type of person. Not about who you want to be. It's who you gotta be so people can stop their shit. Stop being so...
What would you do if the person you trusted most suddenly became a threat to your life? How far can jealousy, rage, and a sense of entitlement push someone who refuses to accept no? Can love, or what looks like love, turn deadly when boundaries are set and independence is claimed? Tonight, we're diving into a story that's as heartbreaking as it is chilling. A story of generosity, of trust, and of a woman who gave everything, only to have it taken away in the worst way imaginable. A woman named Cantrell Hayes-Ross. A woman who ran a thriving daycare, poured her heart into her community, and believed in second chances. A woman who, on Thanksgiving Eve 2024, faced a man she once loved and would never see alive again. But before we get into her last moments, before we get into the man who caused it all, I need you to pause, take a deep breath, and reflect. How often do we ignore warning signs because we want to believe in someone's goodness? How often do we overlook danger when it wears a familiar face? If you're here to learn, to understand, and to honor the memory of someone who gave so much, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Crime Bitz. If you value stories that expose the truth, honor victims, and teach lessons that could save lives, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. But so Cantrell's story is remembered, and so other women can see the warning signs before it's too late. Tonight we ask, what happens when generosity becomes dependency, and dependency becomes deadly? Cantrell Hayes-Ross wasn't just a woman living her life. She was a force of nature. 34 years old, full of energy, love, and a passion for children that went beyond business. Her daycare, Friend Zone Learning Center in Savannah, Georgia, wasn't simply a building where kids spent the day. It was a safe haven, a sanctuary, a place painted with bright colors, butterflies, and flowers, all hand-painted by Cantrell herself. The kind of place where you could immediately feel the care and attention she poured into every corner. Families were on waiting lists just to get their children into her daycare. Parents would arrive to pick up their kids, only to find them begging to stay a little longer. Because at Friend Zone, Cantrell made sure every child felt seen, heard, and loved. During the pandemic, when families lost internet access, when schools were closed, when parents struggled just to feed their children, Cantrell personally delivered activity packets to homes. When the daycare budget was tight, she paid for supplies out of her own pocket. She gave not because she had to, but because she cared. Everyone who knew Cantrell said the same thing. She was outgoing, radiant, and always ready to help. A neighbor needed emergency childcare? She handled it. A family was struggling with medical bills? She organized fundraisers. Someone needed advice or a listening ear? Cantrell made time. She had a warmth that drew people in and a charisma that made them feel safe. Friend Zone Learning was doing so well that she was already looking at locations for a second center, dreaming bigger for her community. On social media, Cantrell's personality shone through. She posted videos of the kids at her daycare, shared updates about the business, and showed herself as a woman full of life. In one video, she celebrated her birthday with her sister and friends. She joked about turning 34 while insisting she looked 26, laughing at herself and radiating confidence. In another, she was surrounded by her children, basking in their love and admiration. Cantrell knew her worth. She knew her purpose, and she believed that people deserved second chances, even when the world told her otherwise. And then she met Terrell Nelson. When Cantrell Hayes-Ross met Terrell Nelson in early 2024, she saw a man who had been through hardship, a man trying to rebuild his life. What she didn't see at first was the pattern of violence and instability that had defined his past. Terrell Nelson, 31 years old, had been arrested 10 times before meeting Cantrell. His first arrest came at 19 for simple battery after a nightclub fight. He received probation, but his brushes with the law only intensified. By 2016, his criminal record included drug possession, criminal trespass, and battery against a former girlfriend, charges that sometimes ended without conviction, sometimes not. His life was marked by conflict, tension, and repeated encounters with the law. In 2013, he was charged with murder after a man was shot on his front porch. He and another man were charged, but both were later acquitted. Even without a conviction, The charge itself painted a portrait of a man living on the edge, surrounded by violence. In 2019, Terrell was convicted of aggravated assault. He attacked a man he suspected was involved with his girlfriend at the time. The victim suffered a broken jaw and a fractured eye socket. Terrell was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but served only 18 months before being released on parole in early 2021. By the time he met Cantrell, he was still on parole, still under supervision, still carrying the weight of his past actions. When Cantrell met Terrell, she saw a man who needed help, someone she could support and uplift. She believed in second chances. She believed in giving people a chance to prove they could change. But the reality of Terrell Nelson was far more complicated. His past was not just a series of unfortunate events. It was a pattern, a series of decisions and behaviors that demonstrated control, anger, and an inability to handle rejection. What Cantrell didn't know, what the world would tragically see too late, was that love, support, and generosity were things Terrell could exploit, but not respect. Cantrell Hayes-Ross gave people chances. That was who she was. And when she met Terrell Nelson, she gave him a chance. At first, it looked innocent enough. A connection, a spark. She believed in him. She helped him get into job training, reconnect with his children, and rebuild a life after prison. She supported him financially and emotionally, investing in someone she thought was worth it. But giving is easy. Recognizing dependency and manipulation is harder, especially when you care about someone. By the summer of 2024, Cantrell began to notice patterns. In every photo posted on social media, Terrell's face was blank. No smile, no warmth, no emotion. Friends noticed it immediately. His energy was off, uncomfortable, disconnected. He wasn't invested in the relationship the way Cantrell was. Cantrell's posts began reflecting the emotional drain she felt. In June 2024, she wrote, "I poured out my cup so much for him, and now that my cup is empty, he won't even give me a sip back. I feel used and abused, and now I'm repairing myself." She had recognized the imbalance. She had realized she was giving everything and getting nothing in return. And then she pulled back. That's when things turned dangerous. Terrell couldn't accept it. The man who had depended entirely on Cantrell's generosity, stability, and love suddenly faced loss of control. And loss of control often turns into rage for someone like him. The breakup played out publicly. Cantrell posted about moving on, about valuing herself, about refusing to settle for someone who wouldn't meet her halfway. Terrell responded online, comments demanding she delete photos of them together, derogatory remarks, and finally, cruel public insults, calling her ugly, attempting to strip away her dignity in front of the world. Cantrell, however, refused to engage. She focused on her daycare, on her community, and on reclaiming her peace. But the warning signs were clear. He wouldn't let go. He was obsessed. He was bitter. He felt entitled. And entitlement, when combined with a history of violence and a lack of boundaries, can become deadly. November 27th, 2024, was a day like any other for Cantrell Hayes-Ross, at least on the surface. The daycare was closed for Thanksgiving, but Cantrell was still at Friend Zone Learning, using the kitchen to prepare food for her family. A friend was there with her. They sat outside, chatting, while Cantrell moved in and out of the kitchen, checking on the cooking. She was focused, calm, and unaware that Terrell Nelson was already on his way. Terrell showed up unannounced. A confrontation quickly followed. He wanted another chance. She told him no. That simple word, the word she had used countless times before, was enough to spark his rage. According to reports, he called her ugly. And then, in a moment that would change everything, he pulled out a gun and fired multiple times. Cantrell was struck. She collapsed outside the daycare. The life of a woman who had given so much, her time, her energy, her love, was taken in an instant. Emergency responders arrived, but it was too late. Cantrell Hayes-Ross, the woman who had poured her heart into her community, the woman who had touched countless lives, was gone. Police quickly identified Terrell Nelson as the primary suspect. Surveillance cameras from nearby businesses captured his movements, and a friend who had witnessed the shooting confirmed his identity. Less than 24 hours later, Terrell was found at a relative's home in Savannah. He was taken into custody without incident, but the damage had already been done. He was charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Bond was denied, and he remained in jail awaiting trial. The community was shocked, heartbroken, and searching for answers. How could someone so full of life, so generous, be taken in a moment of rage and entitlement? After the shocking murder of Cantrell Hayes-Ross, Savannah was left reeling. Friends, family, and the entire community demanded answers. But justice doesn't happen overnight. It comes slowly, piece by piece, in a courtroom. Terrell Nelson appeared in court in January 2025. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense argued that the shooting was a moment of heat, an argument that escalated, but prosecutors painted a very different picture. They showed a pattern of obsession, months of harassment after the breakup, public insults calling Cantrell ugly, social media comments pressuring her to engage with him, verbal abuse, a refusal to accept boundaries. Cantrell's life had been full of generosity, care, and love, but Terrell's reaction to her saying enough was deadly. Prosecutors argued this wasn't a crime of passion. This was a crime of control. The trial lasted 3 weeks, each day, peeling back layers of the relationship. Witnesses described Terrell's history of violence. Friends recounted Cantrell's efforts to support him. Experts explained how rejection can trigger dangerous behavior in some men, especially those who see women as possessions rather than people. The courtroom was tense. Cantrell's family sat quietly, reliving every detail. They remembered her laugh, her warmth, the way she made children feel safe. They remembered a woman who had built a business from the ground up, helped families in need, and given second chances to people who didn't deserve them. And then came the verdict. In March 2025, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts. Terrell Nelson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion, no remorse, no sign that he understood what he had taken from the world. Cantrell's family spoke to the media afterward. Her sister described her as someone who saw the best in people, even when others didn't. She believed in second chances, and that belief had cost her life. Cantrell Hayes-Ross's story is tragic, but it also carries a lesson, one that every viewer should hear. This wasn't just about a breakup. It wasn't about beauty or appearances. It was about control, entitlement, and the danger of ignoring warning signs. Here are the warning signs. A partner who cannot respect boundaries when you end a relationship. Someone who publicly shames or belittles you for asserting your independence. A pattern of harassment or obsession that continues long after the relationship is over. Past behavior that includes violence or threats, even if they claim it's in the past. Terrell Nelson ticked every box. And when Cantrell finally reclaimed her life, that's when the danger escalated. For some people, being refused or losing control triggers rage. And in extreme cases, that rage becomes lethal. But Cantrell's story also shows the power of resilience and self-worth. She refused to stay in a relationship that drained her mentally, emotionally, and financially. She knew her value, and she acted to protect herself. That courage is part of her legacy. For those watching, it's important to ask yourself, are you recognizing the signs of a controlling or dangerous partner? Are you keeping people aware of your situation? Safety isn't just about avoiding harm. It's about planning, trusting your instincts, and reaching out for help before it's too late. Her community remembers her not just as a victim, but as a leader, a nurturer, and someone who changed lives. Cantrell built her daycare with her own hands, painted it with colors that welcome children, and filled it with love, creativity, and care. She went out of her way to support families and help friends, even when it cost her time and energy. Her death reminds us how fragile life can be, and how quickly generosity and kindness can collide with someone else's darkness. Cantrell's story isn't just news, it's a warning, a lesson, a call to action. Recognize the patterns, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the danger that can come from someone who refuses to let go. Cantrell Hayes-Ross was more than a victim of a senseless crime. She was a force in her community, a woman who gave more than most could ever imagine. Her daycare, Friend Zone Learning, wasn't just a business. It was a home away from home for children, a safe space filled with color, laughter, and love. During the pandemic, when families struggled, Cantrell delivered activity packets to children who didn't have internet access. When a family faced medical bills, she organized fundraisers. She answered calls at all hours, offering guidance, support, and care. Her energy was unstoppable, her heart immeasurable, and her dedication unmatched. The tragedy of her death sent shockwaves through Savannah. Candlelight vigils were held, her favorite colors and balloons filled the streets, and parents, friends, and strangers alike came to honor her memory. They remembered the woman who always said, "I've got you," and meant it. Her legacy is a powerful reminder. Generosity and kindness are strengths, but self-protection matters. Cantrell chose herself when it became necessary. She set boundaries, valued her life, and refused to be diminished. And even in death, she teaches us courage, self-worth, and the importance of watching for warning signs in relationships. We remember her not for the way she died, but for the way she lived, fully, boldly, and with a heart wide open. That's the story of Cantrell Hayes-Ross, a woman who gave so much, only to have her life cut tragically short. Let her story serve as a warning, but also as a call to action. Value yourself, protect yourself, and never ignore the signs of danger in the people around you. If you found value in this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to Crime Bitz. Share her story so more people can learn from it. Remember, every life matters, and every warning counts. Rest in peace, Cantrell Hayes-Ross. Your community remembers you. Your legacy will never be forgotten.